Our next speaker, in a manner of speaking, Bill Pukka, is a professor of philosophy in the Department of Cognitive Science. And he's teaching this semester a course on democracy and anarchy. And told me that that my idea of a teach-in, too young for the 60s, was not at all what a 60s teach-in was like, but he has sent someone in his stead to give us a taste of a 60s teach-in, I believe. So.
Hello, I'm Bill Pukka. In deference to the fast-approaching spirit of Halloween, I'm channeling through my friend and teaching assistant, Ryan Jenkins. These few remarks will concern actual democracy as opposed to conceptual democracy, also the difference between democracy and paternalism, the importance of self-rule or self-determination, and the importance of power. Democracy, real living democracy, is the application of its principles. Sadly, it is very difficult to figure out how democratic principle applies to any situation when so many of our most cherished beliefs that we hold true today about democracy are in fact completely anti-democratic. Driving home from my anarchism and democracy class Friday, I heard John McCain talking on the radio about what he'd do if elected president. He spoke first about the fact that Bush's policy was no longer supported by the American public, and the fact that this will of the people in any democracy must win out under any circumstance. This comment was followed by his pledge, if elected, to do what he thought was best for the country, as if following the people's will and following his own were the same exact thing. New York Governor Spitzer was interviewed next about Troopergate and his plan to issue driver's licenses to aliens without requiring that they give a social security number. He was told about a poll that showed that a great majority of the New York public was extremely against this plan, and he replied, quote, "That's one thing you'll never see from me, abandoning a policy because it's unpopular. I do what I believe is in the best interests of this state. That's what I was elected to do." Again, both representative democracy and contrasting paternalism are equated here. Imagine equating the will of the people on an issue with the issues being unpopular, as if talking about some boy band on the radio. When Bush was asked last year if he was considering a pullout from Iraq, given polls that showed such a strong majority of Americans against the war, he replied, "That would be governing by focus group, and that's not how I govern." There's even a New York Times bestseller at present that portrays as courageous, not treasonous, those presidents in history who stuck to their policies against all public opinions on the matter. This logic gives new meaning to the would-be democratic principles of representing the will of the people as a public servant who is to be a true and faithful agent of the public. Indeed, it provides the opposite meaning. Paternalism is treasonous. How many times do our highest government officials claim that the American people want policy X, or I know the American people are behind policy Y, yet they never bother asking anyone, any member of the American people at all? The RPI faculty, or at least the faculty senate, often talks about democracy at RPI and the democratic role of the Senate. I'm not quite sure why such talks make any sense. The first thought that would come to mind for me hearing that phrase is faculty representing student interests, especially to the administration. Students have a governing body, but in certain ways faculty have far more power than the students. Students are our charges, our people, or concern in this educational process. Education is about learning primarily, not teaching. And so it would seem most appropriate that we faculty advocate for them, representing their interests, even to our colleagues. But at present, the faculty has a different target in mind. A central and defining feature of democracy is self-government or self-rule and self-determination. But the RPI faculty and its Senate have never had anything like that. As has been made clear as crystal, in the best case scenario, the faculty has the so-called power or authority to make recommendations. When the administration or trustees get these recommendations, they have the power and authority to throw them immediately into the trash without reading one word of them. Is that self-determination of any sort? In America, we speak of democracy as having a say in governance, but that is not democracy. When the administration and trustees originally suspended the faculty senate and started its own review of a faculty governance to create a new form, the faculty protested it in a very strong language. They held a rare referendum, with the great majority of faculty voting to reinstate the Senate and stop the new review process. Faced with this resolution, the president held a general meeting with faculty to figure out, as she put it, how to move forward together. Afterwards, she issued a letter saying she listened to and heard that the faculty staunchly opposed the suspension and review process. She and the trustees and provost fully understood that, no ifs, ands, or buts. Then she immediately deduced how we'd move forward together. The Senate would not be reinstated and the provost review would go forward. That reaction is as good as throwing faculty recommendations into the garbage. In fact, it's more insulting than that to democracy. These observations of paternalism and tyranny in US government and at RPI show something about democracy that democracy's advocates rarely ever mention. Like any system of governance, democracy rests on power.